Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Shield,
And I'm Benjamin Shield.
and it is lovely to be here with you today. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And we are going to talk about the 10 questions you can ask to gauge a man's emotional availability. What do you think
Perfect.
about that one? All right. We've been talking about this all morning. So we've got this down. Well, first of all, if I'm going to start with anything, I will say that we are not big believers in questions and having agendas and trying to probe for information on dates.
Right. You don't want to present these questions as like a list, because it could seem like homework to a man and actually push him away. So we want this to come up organically in conversation.
Yeah. And also, most things, really you need to use your own powers of observation to gauge these things. And usually they will just come up in conversation. Two people have to fill the airwaves and find something to talk about. So questions will come up. And one thing we don't want to do is give you a list of questions and then you go in and you go before the date, okay, I'm going to ask these 2 questions and see what he says, because I'm on a mission to determine this man's emotional availability. While it's important to be looking for these things and asking yourself these kinds of questions, nothing is definitive. And you really shouldn't be going on your dates just wanting to, having a checklist of things that you're trying to determine. So I don't know how to say this in the right way. You want to be observing a man's level of emotional availability, but you don't want to have a checklist like you're on a mission to find out.
Right. And even though we're suggesting these 10 questions, sometimes you can really get a sense of a man from 1 or 2 or 3 questions.
Or just by being with him.
Just by being with him.
I never had a list of questions with you. I don't even think I ever went in ever, like with trying to figure you out. I think it just evolved and and unfolded. And I trusted my own powers of observation. Yeah. So, but I know that people love lists, and I know that they like to have questions. And so let's look at this list of questions more as a very loose guideline for how, and we encourage you to come up with some of your own. To be honest, like, we really think that these are just a jumping off point for everybody. We don't want you memorizing them. We want you to understand, even more than the questions themselves, the quality of the questions and where they're coming from, like why these questions might get a man to open up more, and why they will help you gauge if he can open up, or if you ask a question like this and he changes the subject, or he gives you kind of a perfunctory answer. Something I think is really important, babe, for women to know is that especially when you're asking a man deeper questions, you have to pause and give a man an opportunity to think.
Yeah, we take longer times to process. And so, we may just pause, and if someone then jumps in with more conversations or more questions or qualifying the questions, it just interrupts the process.
Yeah, and so it may take 30 seconds, 60 seconds. I mean, it may take, for what a woman might seem like an eternity, for a man to actually come up with an answer. And just because he doesn't jump right in and start talking, he may actually be thinking, he most probably is thinking about what you just said. And I think one of the problems for a lot of men is that women just talk over them and they don't give them a chance to digest something. So I always recommend that women just start to count 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000.
And you want to see the quality of the answer. It may not be a definitive answer, but if a man is willing to really think about something, because many men, shallow men, emotionally unavailable men will deflect the question, or with a joke or changing the subject, or shifting in their chair. So if someone really is thinking about something, it may not be the answer he would give if he had a day or two to think about it, but it's the quality of how he wants to interact with you.
Yeah, I had a very, very, very sweet moment with my great uncle Sid. We were in, I know you know the story, but we were in Sanibel Island visiting him and my great aunt Ruth, who is gone and really was like a mother to me. I adored her. She was the most incredible woman, and men loved her. And I remember when one day we were at Blockbuster. Do you remember this? We were at the video store getting videos.
Right.
And Ruth waited in the car. Maybe you even waited in the car with her.
I did.
And Sid and I went into the store to pick out some videos. And Uncle Sid ran into a gentleman that he hadn't seen in a while. And this man said, "How's Ruth? How's Ruth?" And Sid said, "Oh, she's in the car." And this man lit up and he said, "Oh, I'm going to go say hi," And the way he lit up at the just talking about Ruth, and ran out to say hello to her. And I asked Uncle Sid, I said, "What is it about Aunt Ruth? Like, men just seem to love her." And I was really curious about that. And the next day, almost 24 hours later, I was sitting out on, the balcony reading, and my Uncle Sid came and sat down next to me. I was on a lounge chair and he sat down next to me and he said, "I've been thinking about that question you asked me yesterday." And it was so incredible. Uncle Sid was a pretty amazing man. He was a corporate lawyer and incredibly intelligent, very well liked man. And he really thought about the question. And he said, "I've been really thinking about that question you asked me about your Aunt Ruth." And he started to open up to me about how amazing my aunt was, and why men loved her so much, and what it was about her that was so attractive to men. And he said to me, I'm sure you want to know, it's not really important to what I'm saying, but he said to me that Ruth, they met when she was
maybe 15.
15, and he was in college. So he was a few years older than her. And Uncle Sid invited her, would invite her to his fraternity parties. And he said he'd go to get some punch and he'd come back and she'd have 5 guys sitting around. He'd have to push the guys away just to get next to her. So he said that she was a rare combination of beauty and kindness, that there weren't there weren't many women as beautiful as she was. And most of you would not remember who this person is, but she looked a lot like June Allison, who was a very beautiful, put together blonde. And she actually had a TV show she was a commentator with, I think, two other men
Right.
on a political TV show for a year. So very bright woman, very beautiful woman, but men found her very approachable. And that's a unique combination of qualities. And so Uncle Sid said that that was, part of her charm. And even well into her 80s and even early 90s, she was still a magnet. So I admired that. So the point of that story was I asked a question that I didn't even think was that deep, but my Uncle Sid really took it to heart. And, it took him almost a full day just to really think about the question and come back to me with an answer. So,
And that's why men could feel pressured, kind of pushed against the wall if there are a series of questions, or, if someone wants an answer immediately.
mhm.
And one way of asking a question is that to a man is that you don't have to give me the answer now, but I'd love to know,
Yeah.
one of these days soon, which would also invite the next date, what you feel about, or what is, or what would happen if, and all of these things that may take a day
Mhm.
or two to really, because sometimes men have never really examined the question.
Yeah.
And these are important questions.
Well, men particularly think, they really do. I think women don't, we say it's a woman's prerogative to change her
Mhm.
opinion, but with men, they pride themselves on having an opinion, having a perspective on something. And so they take it much more seriously to think about what their answer might be instead of like saying one thing and then saying, well, maybe this, or it makes a man look wishy-washy if he doesn't have a firm perspective or a firm opinion about something. So, and the other thing too, I would offer is we may use the word think with men rather than the word feel,
Right.
because men are much more, they're much more able to talk about their thoughts than their feelings. And it doesn't mean that they don't feel, but it does, men often have feelings, but they can't necessarily identify what the feeling is. Yeah. So it's better to ask a man what he thinks about something rather than how he feels about it.
And if a woman asks a man a question, sometimes it's good if they could give just a brief example of something in their own life.
Mhm.
Like, what are they most proud of? And for the woman not to go on, so it kind of interferes with the man's ability to respond.
Yeah.
And he becomes a listener, but just something that kind of primes the pump.
Okay.
Good.
Ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right.
I think one important question is to ask him what he's learned from past relationships.
And not just about his past relationships, but what he's learned from them.
Exactly, because there could be some really terrible relationships, but he's learned some very important factors that would make the next relationship or future relationships more successful.
Yeah. And you also want to hear how he talks about his exes, if he comes across as a victim, if he paints himself as the villain, if he's overly responsible or not responsible at all. Also, the way he talks about former partners and women in his life. Look, he may have had the worst relationship in the world with his ex-wife, but if they had children together, she's the mother of his children. Right. And so it's important that he doesn't call her a psycho bitch, but that he said, that he is able to talk about the relationship, but with compassion and some understanding. And it's not as if he can't say, it was tough, or I had my heart broken, or I felt like I really tried and failed, but there has to be some accountability.
Hmm. Absolutely. Or, and to admit that he wasn't ready at that time for a successful relationship.
Yeah.
But what he learned from that relationship, he learned what he needed to, what part of his game he needed to upregulate.
And it's really important, I think, too, babe, for women to know that any man who goes through a divorce, whether it's his fault, no matter what the circumstances are, he feels like he failed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Particularly if it's a marriage where vows are given and a man promises, and a divorce means he's broken his promise. He's broken his word, which is going to be incredibly crushing.
For a man in particular.
Yeah.
Why? Talk more about that, honey.
Well, a man, the word is his bond. And if he's standing there in front of a minister or whoever's, and his community, and he's proclaiming these words, and then he breaks them, it affects him, his own heart, but also how he appears in the community of having made these promises, these vows, these commitments.
And it's also a huge factor in why men don't want to get remarried. I mean, a lot of men are not being jerks. Some guys are, and they're just avoidant and all. But that avoidance often comes out of the fact that they did fail and they know they failed. And they, at some level, feel responsible. Even if the woman was nuts or she had her own issues, they feel like they failed and that they should have been able to make it work.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to see how he responds to the question about what he's learned from past relationships. Is it with acceptance, kindness to himself, humility, kindness to the other person, an understanding, an overview, or is it vindictive? Is it mean? Is it small?
Yeah. I mean, both you and I were in marriages to people that we know their shortcomings, and we know both of us were up against a wall, that there was nothing we could have done in those with either one of these people to move the needle. It just wasn't, but we also look at our own choice and, how we chose them, why we chose these people as partners.
And we wouldn't have the marriage we've had for these 20 plus years.
Yeah.
If we hadn't had these difficult relationships, because we learned from them and we grew from them.
Yeah. So, number 2.
Well, tell him a story about when something happened in your life, like a death of a pet or a friend or a family member, and see how he responds. Is it with empathy? And can he share a story of his own where he opens his heart because of what you just shared?
Yeah. Does he meet you there? So does he meet your vulnerability with his? Does he say, I lost a friend in high school and I understand how hard it is to lose somebody who's a lifeline, who's an anchor in your life. And it was devastating for me. I had a hard time getting over that.
Yeah. And I think most people have a story about a pet, a favorite pet that passed, and that they're still not over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also to see if somebody is very cool or casual about those kinds of, subjects. Mm-hmm. Like if they just compartmentalize those things, or if they're open, and if they did have, even, if you're not saying, how did you feel when that happened, but that they're saying, this was hard, or this was really a loss in my life. Mm-hmm. And something I think it's very important for women to know, a man may only share a line or two. a man may say, I had a loss in my life that of a friend that was very dear to me, or I lost a pet when I was a young boy, and that pet was, everything. I loved this
Yeah.
dog. It followed me everywhere, and you know, it was hit by a car or something. And then that's it. He may not share more than that. And it's very important for women to know not to process that.
Yeah.
Like the guy doesn't want to
Mhm.
go back into the memory and unravel
Right.
it and get too deep. It's, it is enough
Mhm.
that he gives you even a line or two, that he meets you at that level. But most men are not going to go right. I mean, you even stop me. Sometimes you'll bring up your ex, and then I'll start asking you a couple of questions, and you'll say, I didn't bring this up to process.
And it's a really good point that sometimes a man will just have a line or two just saying, it was devastating,
Yeah.
or I'm still not over it. And for someone sitting across from him to start probing, well, what makes you not over it? Or it, it just takes it away from emotion to, it takes it from the heart to the head.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I even know, like, before those words come out of my mouth, there's that little voice inside that says, don't go there. But somehow the words just come out anyway, because I'm a woman and it happens. All right, number 3.
I think it's important to
It's a good one.
ask, um, or at least navigate, what his core values and core principles are, because that's key.
Yeah.
Because for two people to have a successful relationship, they need to share these core values and core principles. They could have other things not in common, but if their core values and principles are in alignment, that's the foundation of a great relationship. So, for example, just seeing, like you may say, well, my core values and principles are honesty or loyalty, or being available to my partner, or being as authentic as I can.
Yeah.
Or having a belief in something, a greater power than myself.
Yeah. I think it's really important also to listen. I would encourage women, if a man is sharing, because this is a question that a lot of men can open up about. This is a topic of conversation that can be very rich and deep. So this is one of my personal favorite questions, because you will learn a lot about a man. They can open up about these things. It is really at the essence of who a man is, are his values and principles. And so don't start to co-opt the conversation and run off with it and then start going into your stuff. This really is a time when you're talking about these things to sit back and really say, wow, that's amazing. Can you tell me more about that?
And one of the important things that a woman gives to a man is thinking about these questions. Because if two guys are sitting together at a bar, or on a couch watching sports, or whatever it is, or on a golf links, that they're not going to be talking about these things. So the importance of a woman to a man, one of the many importance, is for a man to be able to clarify these thoughts. That may have been nebulous. He may live by certain principles, but hasn't really defined them. So for a woman to be present and gently ask these questions and give a man space to answer it is critical, because he's not going to get it from his guy friends.
Really? Like, they're not going to lean over and say, so who's your favorite player on the Lakers, and what do you admire most about him? Not going to happen.
They may get to the first part of the question,
Uh-huh.
but not the second.
And that is actually a question that we didn't put down, but could also be an incredible question to ask a man. Like, who is the person you admire most?
Yes.
And what do what is it that you admire about that person?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
Or if you had a chance to shake hands with any person on the planet,
Mm-hmm. I know who you would.
Yeah, exactly.
I know your favorite person.
Yeah.
Do you want to say?
Oh, Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's so great. I love that. All right. So number 4.
Share something that's going on in your life and see if he responds with empathy. Does he meet you there? Or does he change the subject? Does he deflect it? And if it's something, let's say you're sharing something about what happened at work, what would he do in this situation? Ideally, he's just not trying to solve your problem, but he's emotionally available in saying what he would do himself in the situation, but not offering advice of what you should do.
Well, and also just listening to how he responds. Like if you share something, a fight you had with your girlfriend, does he immediately take her side and say, well, whatever. I mean, one of the things that is so powerful in our relationship and that I am constantly astounded by is just you are always on my side 24/7. Like no matter what happens, you are always my hero and my champion. And
being on your side may also mean reflecting things back to you for more clarity, not just agreeing with you.
No, but if something goes wrong or somebody mistreats me or, you always really champion me and you actually get angry at people who are not nice to me.
Very true. Very true.
You get very angry and upset. There was one time where you said to me, I couldn't sleep last night. And I said, why? And you said, because I wanted to go beat that guy up. That was so incredible to know that I had a man who would feel that way, and really, you're amazing that way. But you do, I think it's really important to share, like intentionally share a situation, not just sit and talk about your day and whatever, but pick something that happened and really share it to see how this man responds. I remember one of my favorite stories was when it was a terrible situation, but where I thought I had lost the money from all the sales, the Christmas sales at my little gift store that I had in Los Angeles. I was rushing around, on New Year's Eve, and I thought I had lost all the money. And instead of you saying, well, did you retrace your steps? Did you call this person or that or whatever? You said, let's lay down on the bed together. And then you told me about a time you lost a lot of money. And that was the most beautiful thing because you met me where I was instead of, processing it or trying to figure it out or, solve it. You just met me there because you knew immediately how horrible I was feeling and that what I needed more than anything was empathy. I think you knew too that I had been retracing my steps. That's all I had.
And eventually found the money.
I did find the money.
In this secret compartment in your purse that you had forgotten about.
Yeah. So number 5.
What was the best day of his life? A man may have to really think about this because there've been a lot of days, and a lot of good moments. So it's assuring him that he doesn't have to come up with a definitive answer, but like what's the best day that you could remember, in your life? Yeah.
And by the way, I'm going to put a caveat. I'm going to put a caveat here, an asterisk. Do not set a man up to say, oh, the day I met you,
Right.
or our first date or something along those lines. I would almost say, beyond anything to do, with me or us, what was really the best day of your life? Like when you look back and you think about your life, what was the best day?
And let's say a man is searching his memory bank and can't, because of the stress of a date, particularly if it's like an early date with someone, he can't think of an answer. And the woman could ease his mind by saying, you don't have to answer that now, but I'd love to hear this. If you have a moment to think about it, let me know, like at another time.
And you may even amend it by saying, tell me about one of the best days of your life, so that it doesn't have to be, because men are going to take things literally. And so if you say, what is the best day of your life? A man is just going to be sitting there like rifling, going through his memory bank.
Yeah.
And
his history in sports, his history with relationships.
So it would be an easier question to say, tell me about one of the best days of your life. I think that's a little better.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And knowing that he may not come up with an answer, and just encourage him, or like at a later date, a later moment to share that. Yeah.
This is one every woman's gonna love.
Oh, what are his love languages? And the love languages, the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, gifts, physical touch, acts of service, and quality time. So I think a lot of men will say acts of service, touch, maybe, and ideally quality time, probably less gifts and words of affirmation, but it depends on the guy.
Yeah. But guy, it's not, it's not a question guys would talk about.
No.
Hey, Benjamin, what's your love language, dude? I'm reading this book.
Right. That's not going to happen.
Would you and Richard have ever had that conversation?
No, but I think that non-verbally we would know from, like good friends would know what is important to them.
Interesting. All right, number 7.
Well, I think it's telling, and this is something guys can often answer more easily. What is the favorite film that moved him, and what impact had it made on him? So for me, I could think of movies like Field of Dreams, where it's really about reconnecting with the father, and also being dedicated to a cause. Like go the distance. If you build it, they will come. And so those words have repeated in my mind and in conversations.
So even as you're talking about it, you're getting emotional.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah. In fact, the second book that I published, I changed because of Field of Dreams, driving home from the film, I realized I needed to dedicate it to my parents. And so, which I did.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's really lovely. Yeah. So a man can come up with a film that had an impact on him. And not, you don't just want to ask what his favorite film was, because you'll get Animal House. Yeah, you. But you want to ask a film that moved him, a film that touched him.
Yeah.
That had an impact a deeper impact.
Yeah. And films do touch men.
Mhm.
It may not be rom-coms. It may not be, chick flicks. It could be a sports film.
Mhm.
It, you never know what it could be. It could be an action film where a guy rises to the occasion, which
Yeah.
is, that hero's journey again and again that men crave,
Mhm.
to be someone's hero. So, yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I think 8 is a great one. I think any man could answer this.
Yeah. And there may be more than one answer, but
Mhm.
what is he most grateful for? And he could say family, or his spiritual life, or his health, or having financial security, but it will be interesting. And again, there may be more than one answer to this. And it's also important then for a woman to acknowledge that and then share.
Mhm.
But I think for any of these questions and answers, it's important for the woman to acknowledge it first before she may jump in with and share her own experience.
Yeah. And 9?
9 is, what is his proudest achievement?
Yeah.
And that may be something he could answer on the spot. And again, there may be more than one answer. For me, and it's not because I'm sitting across from you, but it's our marriage, of these 20 plus years, how successful and how happy we both have been. And, it's rare. And so it's I'm proud of the books I've done, proud of my career. I'm proud of how I show up in the world. So all of these things, but it may not just be one thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the last one?
Last one, I really like, if money wasn't a factor, what would be his dream job? So, he may be working at a job that's lucrative or at least good enough. But he may have wanted to be a musician. He may have wanted to be a minister. He may have wanted to just volunteer. You never know. But if just money weren't a factor, he had all the money, what would his dream job be? And that's very telling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And along with that could also be like he may love his work and his career, but there also may be like, what are 2 or 3 things that are top of your bucket list? Things that you're longing to do. Like if you had all the time in the world and you wanted to go on safari, or I was actually over at the Raven yesterday, and it's a consignment store here in Los Angeles, in Santa Fe. And this young guy that works in the smaller shop, that really cute young guy, we were talking, and he was a little sunburned, and he had been hiking the Continental Divide Trail.
Wow.
And he said, it stretches all the way, I think, down the Continental Divide all the way to Mexico. And he said that he would really like to hike the whole trail, which takes about 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, well, maybe you'll find someone wonderful to go with you. And he said, I really love this is a young guy. And he said, I really love my solitude. He said that, I said, how would you do it? Because it's in the middle of nowhere. And he said it would take him about 6 months to plan it, and that they have to mail things to themselves so that there were like things, provisions and things at different places along the way. But he said, maybe, I would have somebody come and join me for a short period, but he said, I really love my solitude. And this guy is probably in his very early 20s.
Well, I feel very shallow because I probably would have said I would love to take a pastry tour of Europe. Just about the same. Tomatoes, tomatoes. Yeah.
That's very funny. Oh my God. What would be on your bucket list besides a pastry tour, which I know you're kind of not kidding?
Oh, well, bucket list or dream. First, I'm in my dream job.
Mhm.
You know, I plan to never retire. You know, I joke, but semi-joking that because I'm a manual therapist, you know, hands-on, old school, you know, for the last 40 plus years, that if I start falling off my bench, that I'm going to have you duct tape me to it. So I have my dream job, and my bucket list has become smaller and smaller. I think some people, it becomes more prominent with age. You know, like I need to get this in before, you know, while I still can. But I think being satisfied with my life, that the bucket list, you know, the things on the bucket list have become more translucent. You know, it'd be nice to travel and see certain spots we've talked about and planned for, but you know, we really travel to be together, and so I'd have to think about that. I'll get back to you on a later date if we have a second date.
Got it. If we have a second date. Well, in some ways, we've had one long first date. So.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
Or not long, but ongoing.
Yeah.
It's been like one long first date that never ended. On that note, it's been a pleasure, Mr. Shield.
Mrs. Shield.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us so much. We've had a wonderful time. This was fun.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really enjoyed this. All right. And I do believe that this question came from one of our excuse me. So I do believe this came from one of our listeners. You can send your suggestions to podcast@lisashield.com. We take those very seriously. So please send us your suggestions. I have a podcast coordinator who reads them all. She compiles a list. We go over them and we pick the best ones. So please send us your ideas. Also, go to lisashield.com. You can click the button there to listen to my free presentation. If you're interested in getting some coaching, Benjamin and I, we have a team of 7 beautiful women, and the two of us, we do a 12-week course called Emotionally Naked Dating for anyone who really just wants to find the guardian of her soul and get this solved. I do another broadcast myself that you can listen to as well. All of this is under the title of our podcast, Finding the Guardian of Your Soul. And please tell everyone you know about these broadcasts, your brothers and fathers and mothers and sisters and your cousins, nieces, nephews, your girlfriends, your guy friends, everyone you know, because we're saying what we say in a different way than anyone else out there. We really create our own content. It's not done with Chat GPT. We try to look at this in our own very unique way from the lens of our guardian of our soul relationship. Because the truth is, there are so few people who are teaching how to do this. And we want you to know that what we have isn't extraordinary. It's really very ordinary. It's something that any one of you can have, and we can show you how to get there. So thank you for joining us. I'm Lisa Shield.
And I'm Benjamin Shield.
And have a beautiful rest of your day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.